And if there's a chair next to you, if you could raise your hand. Okay, so we should be good. If you guys want to stand, you're able to stand in the back. We're not going to kick you out, I promise. I know we do have max attendance in the room, but we're good. So a lot of people confuse sales and renewal pipeline report with sales and retention, I believe. Is that actually what it's called at the top?
Sales pipeline?
Sales pipeline.
Yeah.
And in reality, this is a lot of your retention efforts, but some of those key indicators for retention are also going to be on your agency intelligence report as well. And then we're going to make sense of it all. What do we do with these reports? How do we use them? How do we, Kelly and I specifically, use them in our own agencies? But at the end of the day, maybe some takeaways from you guys. And of course, if you guys always have options or things that you utilize these reports for as well, please share those as well. That's what we're here for. Next screen. So let's actually flip over to HawkSoft real quick. So HawkSoft mentioned and gave you a couple base items here. Close out and send. And that one real quick. There you go. Okay.
Do you have to log in again?
Nope, minimize that one. There, it's popping up. That's online. That's what I deal with all the time. Kelly's a local HawkSoft user, so it's on in-house. I'm an online user, so those of you guys that are online, the reports are going to look the same. I know in some accounting classes that maybe some of you guys have attended, some of the accounting classes look a little different. Online and local, the flow of everything's going to look the same for us today. But those of you guys that just saw that pop up, as online users, you kind of deal with that on and off again. So when you get into sales pipeline, over there on the left, you're going to have your 4 key categories, and that's your lead, your prospect, refused, and rejected. Those are your 4 key components. Those are things that you cannot change. Those are the 4 components you're always going to have here. You can change the sub-statuses. HawkSoft designed this so that way you can utilize it to the best of your ability inside your agency. You can customize it the way that you need to and that sort of thing. Everyone's going to use it differently. Some of the statuses that I'm going to show you, I don't use, but another agency uses and that sort of thing as well. So again, if you obviously need to have permissions to get to this report. So if you are not the administrator owner of the agency and you do not have these permissions, that's okay. Ask your administrator or owner of the agency to see if you need access to these and to make sure that you can get that. But to get to this report, it's in the Reports tab at the very top of HawkSoft, and then it's just the Sales and Renewal Pipeline, or Sales Pipeline Report. So again, the sales pipeline there on the left, you're actually going to just go down those 4 categories there. Again, those are hard-coded. That's it. Now, what is the discerning factor for you guys in your agency between a lead and a prospect?
One you've talked to.
Just a second.
You're fine.
One you've talked to, one you haven't. Lead is somebody you haven't talked to. Prospect is somebody you've talked to and is starting to qualify.
Okay. Is that the general consensus in the room? Okay, perfect. I've actually taught this session before a couple times, and there are people that actually put everything into lead first, and then they move it throughout, and that's okay. Again, everyone utilizes it a little different. So the lead, somebody that you haven't talked to. So I am in a BNI chapter. There's a lot of times that for BNI, I haven't talked to the risk yet. I haven't talked to him. So we're going to put that in as a lead. Sometimes it's a chamber lead. It could be a leads X-date list that you have. It could be anything that is sent to you. You physically haven't talked to someone yet. That's my definition of lead, and that's a consistency in here. That's the way we're going to go with it today. Underneath prospect, obviously we've talked to the person now. There's a funnel, a slew of different statuses that we can actually utilize there. In this case, it could be, you can also discern these between commercial lines and personal lines. So in this case, we have a CL for commercial lines, PL for personal lines. There's discovery, there's submission, all of those things. Again, it's up to you how you want to utilize these statuses. Now, these statuses are all reportable fields. So you can run these reports and literally go through these and run everything down to the wire as to how you need to or how you want to do this. And it's how, again, you want to do it inside your agency. For me, I'm going to be 100% honest here. My agency does not use sales pipeline. Now, we put my philosophy is, if it's not in HawkSoft, it never happened. So we use it, but I will not run, and I do not look at my staff in our reports for sales pipeline. That's because I have an external vendor that we utilize for that. And I like the dashboard look a little bit better on that and the flow of everything there. So we put our prospects in, and at times, depending upon our user, we do use these fields, and some of these fields. But I personally like the way that I can work with my team, and they can log into a dashboard and see everything instantaneously on their report specifically just for them. HawkSoft does not have that feature yet, so if I would give everyone access to sales and retention or sales and the sales pipeline report, everyone's going to see everything inside the agency. They can't just see just their own. So in my agency, I have it to where that person's seeing their own or the people below them, and so that's why we use an external tool at this point. Yes, in the back. What do you use? Well, what external tool do you use? Right now I use Agency Zoom, and the question was what external tool do I use, and it's Agency Zoom. Agency Zoom is a vendor here at the conference, and they were a tech company that started, he was an all-state agent, and decided that their platform needed to be a little bit better too. There are other platforms out there, so again, use what's best for you and everything as well. But that is the platform that I use right now.
Just out of curiosity, how many in the room are utilizing sales pipeline pretty faithfully right now? Ta-da.
Okay, so, and again, that's okay. Utilize it to what's best for you and your agency. Now, but again, before I started using Agency Zoom, we use this feature. And we still use this feature. We just don't use all of the statuses, okay? So we still have leads in there. We still have prospects in our system. And we put the actual client in the system from start to finish. So our prospects are in there. We just list them as a prospect or a lead. And then once we've talked to them, we change it. So again, I don't use all these statuses. I put other statuses in here just to show you that you can customize them. But so the statuses that I can tell you that we use under prospect is quote and proposal. Those are the two that I use. Because I've talked to the person, I'm getting a quote. I have now sent them a proposal. So now they have that in hand. Once then I change whether the fact that now we're going through that pipeline, they're no longer a prospect. They've either told me, yes, we're going to move along and we're going to go ahead and sell the policy, or you know what, we're not going to be a fit. Now we've gone into refused and rejected. So we still utilize them. It's not that I'm running the specific reports day in, day out of this system, but we still put everything into HawkSoft inside my agency. So again, these are customizable, and I can show you guys if you haven't done this. Let's switch back here to the PowerPoint real quick. So these are the systems, and I can tell you these screens are available on the HUG website. So the PowerPoint's on there, as well as if you go to the HUG Facebook page or the actual HUG new website, you can search a lot of templates that people have used and shared. These templates are on there as well for sales pipelines, so you guys can see these things. So they do have personalized statuses. So again, the category based on lead, prospect, refused. They have the pipeline status, what that actual status is, and then what their internal definitions were, how they use them internally. So again, as a prospect, if it's appeal discovery and they're shopping, you spoke about options and shopping carriers. And maybe, it's appeal discovery lender. When lender's link has been received. So some of you guys that have those lenders upload prospect to a website or something like that, maybe that's what it is. And then your suspense category. We're not necessarily going to talk too much about the suspense categories today, but this specific agency that shared this with us utilizes suspense categories based on their sales pipeline as well. So you have one for personal lines, and then you also have one for commercial. And again, those are on the PowerPoint on the actual HUG website right now, and everything there.
And I would say, just before he moves on, if you guys are just going to start implementing sales pipeline, what you have to do is sit down and think about what you want to see as a manager, as an owner. What do you want to see out of this report? And that's how I would build the statuses that you put in. Do you want to see, where it's at in the pipeline, why it's dropped off? So think that through before you create those.
So again, under reports is where you're going to get to that sales and retention report. It is listed retention. Retention, again, could be a definition of a lot of different things. You're not going to find your retention numbers here. That's going to be in the agency intelligence report. The retention aspect of this is to just find those renewals and how to retain your customers and see those types of things there. If you're going to change your statuses underneath the gear, you are actually going to go down to Customize List. Once you're in Customize List, you have all these things you can customize in here, but one of them is Sales Pipeline and Sub Statuses. So you can open that report. You can add and delete anything out of this category here. Obviously, the lead, the prospect, those are hard-coded. You can require them or not require them when you're inserting a new customer into HawkSoft or a new prospect into HawkSoft. So if you uncheck that, you're not, the CSR, the producer who's inserting those prospects, that's not going to be required. But if you want it to be required in your agency, leave them checked. You can obviously, adding a substatus, you're going to click the green button there to add a new, and then you can type in whatever you want. If you want to delete one, it's obviously the red button there. And then, of course, if you want these, if you're anal like me and I want things in alphabetical order, you can actually drag them and put them exactly where you want them inside of everything here as well. Okay?
Yeah, I think one of the other suggestions there is just to make sure that you're very specific about your lead source so that you know if you're running campaigns in certain time frames or if you're running ads in certain social media, label them accordingly so that you can be very specific about what's working.
So back on our sales pipeline here, we have our lead, and you can insert anything, or you can, as you're assigning them, you can put them in here in our prospect. The biggest ones that I actually want to talk about, and if you do not use lead and prospect at all, the biggest ones I want you to take away from is utilizing the refused and the rejected. Because at the end of the day, you want to know why people haven't gone with you. So you gave them a quote. You may not have all of those statuses in there, and that's okay. But utilize the refused and rejected, because at the end of the day, if it's price, if it's no response, they might be happy with their current carrier, whatever the case may be, you at least have those. And the rejected, I use it for agency disqualified. Those are people I don't want to deal with. Maybe it's they didn't want to give me the information. Maybe they were rude to the CSR when they called in. Or maybe it's they want specific coverages that we don't offer. In my agency, we do not write state minimum limits at all. There are other agencies that want that and that will do that, and that is completely okay. We choose to not do that. So if they specifically are requesting for state minimum limits, it is an agency disqualified risk. And so we know that. If it's an underwriting rejected, you're looking at that house and you know specifically on Google Maps, and that image might be from 2019 or whatever the case may be, but you're looking at that house and there is no way any of my companies are going to want this, it's an underwriting disqualified. Or if there's some reports that pop up and you run that MVR or Clue or whatever the case may be, and there's like, absolutely not, we're not going down this route, you can obviously reject them that way. That way you know if they call back in, you type in their name and you pull it up saying, have you ever requested a quote here in the past? You can pull it up and say, we disqualified that. We don't want it. So same thing with refused. We want to know why they didn't go with us and that sort of thing. So those are those sub-statuses there. And you can, again, customize it the way that you want to in your agency. Take some time to talk to the other team members inside your agency and see if they may have suggestions to this as well. There are a lot of times we go through this quarterly with our team. Does this make sense? Do we need to add more? Do we need to change things? Why are we not utilizing this? The one thing you will not see in any of these is none. Anytime that someone hits none in my agency, we have a conversation. And I think some of you guys that maybe attend Stephen Harrington's cleanup courses will understand that as well. He's like, no, we don't put none. There's always a reason for everything inside our system, and we always want to report on it. Any questions on these sub-statuses before we move on? Okay, awesome. So how do we get this? If you're inserting a client, we're going to insert a prospect. So we'll start just with an auto, because that's going to kind of be typical here. And we're going to, this is not my laptop, so spelling errors, please just go with it. Okay. Hopefully all these default things aren't going to kick me out here in a second. So we can put all the information in. It's on your GPI screen, really, is where we're going with this. So right here, you're going to see the status as new. Now, as long as back here your status is prospect on your main screen, you're under the prospect sales and pipeline feature. So general policy, right here is your status. If we click that status, that's where you can change if it's a lead and then how that lead came in. Or if it's a refused. So again, as long as, if it's me that's in here and I'm updating, you can do this to update. You can do this as a prospect. We're just inserting it here. But as long as you're going through the process and you're putting the information in here, the more information, always the better. It's your status under your GPI screen. That's where that's changing all of those sales pipeline features there. Of course, once we actually sell the policy, there's multiple ways to go about that. You can obviously do it by going in here and editing it. The other option, we always have hotkeys in ours as well. So we would create a hotkey up here that says issued, or whatever the case may be, that we can always change those things. And that takes you right into that action field to go ahead and change those features there. So that's how we get the prospect into these options here. So we're inserting a client or prospect. If you already have that client and you're cross-selling, make sure you're inserting that new policy as a prospect as well. Because if you're doing that, let's see if we actually can pull up. All right, so we're just going to pull up a prospect or a customer here. You can actually do an internal. This is not one of my favorite ways of doing it, but if you go in, you can actually change the policy status here, and you can do this as a prospect or a current customer as well, and you can change the status that way as well. If we're doing a lead, now it's giving me those options as to what that sub-status is there. Now, if I'm coming in here, and now we're going into, we're actually selling the policy, it's again changing that policy status. Now we're going into new, issued, reinstate, renewal, rewrite, whatever the case may be. Now, I would always caution you and to tell you, let's just say Deidre Smith here, that's our client that we have pulled up here. She's called back in and she wants us to requote this policy here. Do you guys do the duplicate remarket tool? Okay. It is a godsend. It's one of the ways that obviously we keep log notes and everything in our system because, again, my philosophy is if it's not written there, I can't deal with anything about it. It's not going to remind me to do anything. So if we can go in here, in this case, it's going to tell me. Yes. All right. So it just opens up as if you're inserting a whole new policy again. Once you go through those features, let's go back to the GPI. It's in as a prospect status already. The other thing that you'll notice is that under your source, it's already written as a rewrite if you're actually rewriting the account. So if you're shopping your renewals and that sort of thing, again, that prospect status and everything there, it's telling me the sub-status is required. Look at that. So we're going to quote it here and finish. So then now you actually see that prospect tab is now there. So we can always change those features there too. Yes?
Can you just walk through those first few clicks one more time?
Yep, sorry about that.
No,
I love to click. So so it depends. What started the action? One, if it's a prospect, there's that. So are we talking about the duplicate remarket?
Correct.
Okay. So you're going to be on that original tab, that original policy there. You're just in the action menu, and the way that we do it is we use an internal. So we're going to do everything internal. Now, I think there's an agency that I've talked to before that has that internal link unchecked. They're like, no thanks, we don't want to do anything internal. So again, up to you and your clients or your team members there. And then it's the duplicate remarket. So once you click that, it's going to give you a pop-up just to say that, yes, this is what we want to do. And then, of course, now you're putting in the information for your prospect, that new quote that we're going to actually do.
Was that okay for everybody? You guys saw it okay? Okay. Any questions on this so far? You guys good? Okay, got a question back here.
I was just wondering if you use the dead file option at all. We do a lot of campaign drips, and I think as long as the client is still listed as lead, prospect, or active, those can potentially automatically go out.
Correct.
So I was just wondering if dead file is something that you ever use in your agency.
Yes. Dead files specifically, if there's a customer that leaves the agency or we non-renew, agency non-renews or whatever the case may be, we will actually go in there and we will change that client. Do it here. It's underneath that change client policy. It takes you to that first status. You can actually change that from active, prospect, lead, or dead file. So if you code it as a dead file, that means I don't want to market to them again. Or for some people when they do data cleanup, if they look at an account that they haven't had in 10 years or whatever the case may be to do that, that back-end data cleanup, they'll code those policies as dead files as well. So yes, we do use those.
Or if the client died.
Or if the client died, correct. Yep. Okay, so going back to the sales pipeline, again, that's how we get those numbers in here into the, that prospect status. So if we're, again, looked at fact finding, when you come in here, any of these fields, any of these statuses are clickable. So once you click, you're going to see that this center changes right here. And you can drill this down however you need to. These all others, again, this isn't what I like to see inside my agency. We always try to find a status and fit it somewhere or create a new one. So in this case, let's go back to the fact finding. And we have the producers, HawkSoft, or our Miss Caitlin here. She has 2 statuses, or 2 clients, prospects, that are in fact finding areas. So I might need to sit down with Caitlin and say, okay, where are we at with that? Who are those people? Well, all I have to do is click on the 2, double click, and it's going to now tell me who those people are that she's actually meeting with, or they're trying to find fact-finding information. So I can talk to Caitlin. Hey, when's the last time you talked to him? I can actually go into those. Once you're in here, you can actually double click, and it'll take you to that actual file as well. So I want to see what the log note is. I want to see if she's following up. What information does she need? How can I help? That sort of thing. And so when I'm meeting with my team members, we go through this. Again, I utilize this a little differently than how we're explaining it today, and that's okay. But same reporting is out there. I can sit there with them and have these conversations and say, listen, what can I do to help? Where are we at? What are we stuck with? And so we can do that with lead. We can do that with prospect and those types of things as well, especially as I'm starting to see them move through that, through the steps. You can also, up here, you can group things a lot differently. So you can group by, if you're looking at a specific carrier and what we're quoting right now with that carrier, you have a carrier rep that comes in and they're like, what are you working on right now? Famous quote by a lot of the carriers that stop in our offices. What are you working on right now? How can I help? I can run into this report and we can go under prospect right now, and it's going to change our report structure here in the center, and I can run it by company. So now I can say, okay, farmland, you know what, right now we have one that we're actually quoting with you, and here's the risk. We can, again, double click, and I can talk to them about that risk. So you can use it with carriers, you can use it with your team members, obviously, and again, for you to make sure that that pipeline is there. You have prospects in the status. If you deal with your COIs, your referral networks, those types of things, maybe you want to know, that lender wants to know, hey, I sent you 4 referrals last week. Have you reached out to them? Where are we at in the process? Was it price? Those types of things. So you can drill down those reports as much as you want. Again, group it by company, by policy type, by producer, and then of course you can change the status date, effective dates, the date ranges, and then compare whether you want it to compare between clients and premium there. Questions on that?
Maybe off topic a little bit here, but is there a way to add a list of clients, prospects, leads in a batch mode to HawkSoft so I can then assign them to agents?
There is. I will tell you and caution you of what I'm told a lot of times, it can be cumbersome and challenging because especially what you want it to do is you want it in an Excel spreadsheet, essentially, for it to import correctly. HawkSoft and customer service can always help you guys with that when doing that. Especially some X dates and things like that. If you're purchasing those, a lot of times those come in Excel formats. Reach out to customer service because they can definitely help you guys with that and walk you through that. Great question. Yes?
Just to confirm, it is only policy batch import, not a client batch import, right? Is there a way to do just client batch import that you know?
Dion, do you know that?
Okay, so the question was,
These
Thank
batch,
you.
the batch imports, I don't know, maybe I just didn't ask if there's a way to do just as policy only, just the client basic info instead of requiring to create a policy shell.
policy tab.
That is a great question. I'm not entirely sure. I believe you can for that. It may require you to have a policy, though. So, great question.
You know, we'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it back.
We'll take
do
it back
some
and we'll get
research
with you
and-
on that and try to answer that question. Okay, so again, we can use this report for multiple ways. Again, I use it with carrier reps. I use it with our team members inside the agency. I use it just to pull up and say, hey, how many prospects do we have in the system right now? Sometimes we have to go back in here and clean it up. Not going to lie. You know, there's a lot of times we can put it in as refused. I watch our reports a lot just to see exactly where everything's at in our numbers. So if you kind of go into your agency intelligence report, I always look at these numbers and I'm like, oh, what's my net change? What do I need to do? And sometimes that coincides with your sales and retention to where you need to go back in and update those in there. But most of the time, if I'm updating prospects, I'm looking at, again, this report for the 16. And again, we have no company. And that's not uncommon for a prospect. You know, once we get to that status of a proposal, we're going to go ahead and change the company then at that point. But I want to make sure that these 14, if I'm running that report, you can drill this down. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but you can actually change the layout of this report and say, you know what, I want to know what the effective date was or the status date. So if we actually looked at the status date for this account, we want to add that in. Oh, it's actually in there. Okay, so you can actually change the layout here, but we're going to scroll over here. Status date of this. Let's just say back here in March. Why are we still having a prospect in here from March that we haven't updated? We haven't changed it to refused. We haven't changed it to given a proposal or anything like that. Still in discovery. So I might want to either, one, reach back out and say, hey, are you still interested in that quote? We can quote that. Or I might change it to another substatus to where I can say refused and no response. Because they didn't call us back, or we didn't get back in touch with them, or whatever the case may be. So I always watch those because I don't like things aging too much in our reports. And so that helps kind of clean that up a little bit more so I'm not constantly seeing that number there.
I think you have to pay attention to how your producers are doing with their suspenses. I know we hit this in another class, but if you want to go in there, you can actually trip a suspense and reassign it, or just move that suspense date up with maybe a higher priority code and let your agent or CSR know that this needs to be, you know, they need to reach out again on it or move it through the system. I've always found it best that if it's not moving through the system correctly, have the person that's doing it, don't go in there and fix it for them, but have them do it so that they learn how it moves through the system.
Absolutely. Questions on the sales pipeline, the process on this, or any of these categories here before we move on a little bit? Okay. The next section of this report here is renewal, the renewal report. So we've talked about our sales pipeline, we've talked about our prospects and our leads and how to manage that information in there. And again, there's a multitude of ways of doing that. So if you guys ever have questions or anything like that, you can reach out to us. Also utilize HawkSoft support. They are great in helping you guys through that as well. I have a staff member that is specifically dedicated to renewals inside our agency, or a team of people that specifically are dedicated to this. And that's one of the things through the pandemic that we learned we needed to be proactive about. Each person in my agency kind of did their own sales with their own renewals and that sort of thing. But as things kind of changed through the pandemic and as we changed things internally in our processes, we learned that, you know what, we needed to reach out to people and cultivate those relationships. So we utilize this report consistently. And so if you're looking at your personal lines reports, it defaults right here to say next 60 days. Okay, so that's a default. You can look at it 60 days. Most of your carriers are probably downloading what, every 30 days prior? So if your carriers are downloading 30 days prior, you may want to try to get ahead of the game, so look 60 days in advance. There are some carriers that download a little bit more than that, and that's okay. We like to be very proactive, and so we actually typically go out 90 days in advance. So, well, this information here defaults to 60 days in advance. You can actually change your date range to 90 days, 30 days or 120 days as well in that report. So it also helps you with saying you have 14 renewals coming up in the next 60 days. You have 5 of them that you have their home or another possibly, but you don't have their auto, or you have their home, or you have their auto, not their home, and that sort of thing. And then if you are proactive in doing umbrella policies, it'll actually tell you if you have no active umbrella policies as well. So if you're looking to do some cross-selling quickly in the next 60 days, you can do that with those features there. It's going to say, hey, we have no active home, so we have these auto policies. And you might sit there and look at, and I'm going to pick on Larry Gary here. Larry has 5 customers coming up in the next 60 days, so I can run that report, click on these 5 customers, and help Larry out. And I'm like, Larry, you have these 5 individuals here that I would like to see you try to cross-sell. And we can set up a little campaign to help them out. We can talk through these, and maybe some of these, it's like we've looked at their auto in the past, we don't want it, whatever the case may be. You can help denote that and those types of things, but have that conversation with your producer at that point as well. So again, it's helping with cross-selling in that report. But one of the things I noticed through the pandemic and really into actually 2021 and from January up until really recently is a lot of the mortgage companies are very slow at paying home policies. And in doing so, we're finding out that we are actually getting notifications from our companies saying, you know what, we never got that renewal premium, and we're 15 days past the date of the renewal. And so we're going to now issue a cancellation. And I'm like, whoa, it's mortgage build, what's going on? So of course, now we're trying to be proactive with that. So we actually started doing these 60-day renewal reports. You can actually group it, again, similar to how you can do the sales pipeline there. So we can group it by policy title. In this case, that's how I ran it. And now I'm going to look at my homes. And I'm going to walk through here and see exactly who was mortgage billed and who hasn't paid yet. And that way we can make sure we're following up with the mortgage company there. Do the same thing as your, even if it's not mortgage billed, you can do the same thing exactly if you track billing and working with customers at that point as well. The other thing that I like to use these reports for is I go through here and I find when the last time we've actually heard from the customer and talked to the customer. Shame on me, I actually found one about a month ago that we have not talked to in 15 years inside my agency. She's constantly renewed her auto, constantly renewed her home. They were low premiums, so we never saw a spike in premium increase or anything like that, so it never really triggered to anyone. And the person that she was assigned to has retired from our agency, so it kind of got lumped into another producer who didn't have that relationship and that sort of thing. So she recently had a claim inside the agency, and I took one look at the account and I said, we have a problem. She doesn't have the coverage that I know she needs for this claim. And so shame on us that we didn't do our due diligence, but again, this is why we've hired individuals inside my agency to specifically work on this report and to specifically work on our renewals. So we are catching those things well in advance. And so we do have a renewal process and a template that our people are looking for. They're saying these are the discounts that we're looking for. We're making sure, do we have when the roof was last updated, if we have electric, plumbing, those sorts of things, who the people are that are living in the house. And so a lot of that's characteristics that we are looking for even prior to talking to the customer. We're looking at all those policies that we have to look at that customer prior to us reaching out to them. And then at that 90-day mark, since we look at 90 days, we start at 120 days, then we go down to 90 days, and we start looking at, okay, we're going to send out that survey to the customer. Do they want to meet with us for a renewal this year? So we'll look at, okay, again, last time we talked to them, and then we send out the email and text message, how do you want to meet with us? Do you want to meet on Zoom, Facebook Messenger? Do you want just a phone call? Do you not want to meet with us? Just have us send us your recommendations and that sort of thing. And that, everything there. We do caution people, though, if we haven't heard from in 2 years, we have a little disclaimer in there saying, hey, we haven't heard from you, we haven't met with you in 2 years. We definitely want to have a conversation over making sure that your policy is where it needs to be and where we recommend. So we always have that disclaimer in there just to kind of say, hey, it's been a while since we've officially met, but we always try to do those annual reviews and making sure we're proactive about doing that. And all of that comes from these reports here. So again, you can change your date range. And then we actually now are in the process that once we go through that 120, we got that 90, We are now actually starting to work into the month of January and February, and so our renewal team is actually specifying everything out by week. And so now we're looking at, okay, we have, since my team's working in, we have, these are coming up the week of January 9th. So I worked on January 2nd last week, so now it's not a cumbersome report. It's not a report that says, hey, I just printed out 120 renewals that are coming up in the next 30 days, I need you to funnel through. It's, if we're proactive, we're getting there, we can run this out by week and look at that, and we're staying ahead of the game. So maybe it's Mondays, maybe it's Tuesdays that we're working on renewals with that team or that specific producer. She may have it actually on Mondays. She works with my renewals. On Tuesdays, she may work with my other producers' renewals and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, we're touching this weekly, and it's a manageable report rather than actually having a slew of people that we're trying to go through at one time. And again, you can compare policies and premiums. So a lot of things to drill these reports down. Questions on anything of those right at this point?
When you're looking at someone that possibly has home no auto, is there a place where you can put a note or something that says they're no longer driving? Maybe it's someone that's elderly that still owns their home, good client, but no longer driving. So we aren't constantly trying to submit that, hey, we want your auto, when they're no longer driving.
Great question. In retrospect, what we do in our agency, I am not aware of a specific way to kind of alleviate and get that number out of here at the renewal each week or each year. But what we actually do is we use the client tags. So let's just say in this case, for Larry Gary, we know that Gloria here, we have her home, but we don't have the auto. So we can go up to Gloria's policy, and actually in this this was not a good example. We have the umbrella. We don't have a home or auto. But in this case, what we could actually do in an action menu, and again, we can do it internal or however you want to do it in your agency, we can actually do it as a log note. And I'm actually, down here is where this client tag is. You can, again, customize your categories and everything here. Do it however you want to do it. I'm just going to actually put, let's just do it under prospecting since that's in here right now. Doesn't drive. That's going to drive me nuts. So if I say she doesn't drive, now that's going to be up here. So when I actually click on Gloria's file when we're going through this report every year, I can look at that and say, you know what, she doesn't drive. She doesn't have a vehicle. She doesn't have, that sort of thing. So we're not going to prospect out to her and that sort of thing. So that's the way that we do it in our agency. That's the way that I found is the best for us. The one thing I will caution you guys on, if you're meeting with a client and they can see your screen, we use tags for a lot of things inside my agency, and some things I do not want the customer to see. That little triangle right there will hide that if you're meeting with the customer. So there was a time that the customer was getting ready to walk around and look at my screen real quick, and I hurried up and clicked that because there were things that I did not want them to see in that category there, but that's just a caveat there. So.
You can also pop those client tags. When you load the client, you can set it so that they pop right up.
Great question. So any questions specifically on your renewal report there? In the back there, Dion, behind you.
Yeah, can you break that out by personal lines only, commercial lines only?
Absolutely. So actually, in this report right here, these are for personal lines specifically right here. You do have a commercial lines renewal up at the top here. So you can actually click the commercial lines, and now, again, your commercial lines, a lot of times you want to get well ahead of the ball game there and start having conversations. I know my companies are sending me, hey, we need an updated driver's list, we need this, we have this inspection. So again, if you want to work well in advance, same thing. You can change that 30, 60, 90, and 120 days. You can group it by policy title or by line of business or producer. So if you're specifically looking at those items, you can do that too.
Do you know if this report excludes anything that's with a cancellation pending? No? The expiration date is accounted for in spite of that. So,
correct.
But if it is canceled, then it won't be included in the report.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
If it is hard code cancel inside HawkSoft from a download, or you specifically canceled it, it would not show up here in the renewals. The other thing is if company downloads a non-renewal, as well, it's not going to show up in here either. So, yes.
The other thing you can do, especially if you're working on that cross-sell, for our agency, what we'll go into is the no active auto or no active home. Do it by agent, and I'll just, in that, you can do some batch logs with that report to create suspenses and put that on that agent then. So that you don't have to, you don't have to print it or cut and paste it or do anything and send it that way. You can actually create the suspense item in bulk there.
So what you can also do through any of these, and I would be remiss, those of you guys who know Kenny Hendricks, you see him on stage a lot. You also see him in the group chats in Huntington. I don't know why I said Huntington Bank, or I was thinking Huntington Bank at that point. But Kenny, you'll see on the Hug chats in Facebook and stuff like that. Kenny worked with me on on reports on a couple webinars in the past. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say what you can actually do with these things. So a lot of these conversations that I had were over meeting with the producer or how we can actually reach out to the customer. And again, we utilize this more internally than what we do with other things. But if you have those commercial lines policies coming up, and let's say it's the producer, and I want to say, hey, Stephen Harrington, you have the week of November 7th, you have this policy coming up. You can actually create a letter, an email, and all types of things right out of this report. And so for those of you guys that have letters or email templates set up in HawkSoft, you can actually then do those. So you can create a batch log. So if you have multiple reports in here, you can create a batch log for all of these. You can send an email. Specifically, we have only one person in here. So we can send it an email template there. And then, of course, it's creating the log note as well and that sort of thing. So we can create it and send it specifically to Virginia Harrington here about her renewal. So if we have a renewal email that says, hey, your renewal's coming up, here are some key questions, or we want to meet with you, that sort of thing, you can have that renewal specifically in there as well. Dion.
We actually have a request if you could show the procedure for a renewal. Do you have time to do that?
Show the procedure.
How you do your
how we do
renewals?
ours? Absolutely. So again, and I'll pick on personal lines in here for a minute. So again, we look out multiple ways. And so our steps in our agency and our processes, we've fine-toothed over the last 2 years. And so really sit down with your team and make it a team effort and figure out exactly how you want to do this and set up your renewals. So again, if you want to do the proactive stance and say we haven't heard from these people, or we know we have a specific company that we want to hit a goal with at the end of the year and that sort of thing, how can we utilize this, one, for cross-selling or two, for renewals? And we want to make sure if we have a company that has a large price increase coming or they're raising rates, we want to run this renewal and look at, hey, what could be changing on this customer as well. So there's multiple ways that we do this. Again, for cross-selling opportunities, but specifically on renewals, I look at producer or actually by office mainly. And so if we only have our one location in our agency, so I'm actually going to look at it over the next 90 days, and I'm going to look first, I always look at it by month. I want to know how many renewals I have actually coming. And then from that, I can drill it down by week and that sort of thing, or by producer. So our renewal team inside our agency, what they will do is look at these. The first step that they always do is they actually, they proactively look at the client themselves. And they're going to look at what discounts are missing, what has changed over the last 2 years in that client account. Do we have auto home? Do we need other multi-policy discounts? What are our concerns that we had the last review? Are there things that haven't been done from our last time we talked to them? So maybe we said, and I know Dr. Williams is here in our presence as well, but one thing I learned from Dr. Williams a couple years ago in one of his sessions was, do you have an item of value? Have you had a birthday? Have you had these things that we need to talk about? One, because I'm going to try to cross-sell, but two, I need to make sure that they have the coverage that they need. And so those types of things I'm looking at prior to even having that conversation with a customer, or my team is looking at those conversations there. They then have a form that they fill out in Google Docs, and then they download that form into the customer file as well. I'm saying, this is what I did. These are the things that I checked. Here are my concerns. Here are my recommendations or things we should look at. So then what that does is it then alerts me as the agent that I want to look at that document and I want to talk with my renewal team about that. We then have that conversation and I'm like, okay, I get why you recommended that. Why? We have those conversations. I want to know why they recommended that so they understand what they're working on. But then this is my process, or this is what I would tweak about it, or hey, great job. Let's now set that next step. So that first step is to internally review first. Second step then is to have that conversation with the customer and start to send out that email and text and say, we want to schedule a review. And again, we do reviews a multitude of ways. We can meet for coffee. We can meet on Zoom. We can meet in person, on the phone. I can do a video proposal for your renewal and go over it if that's what it is. A lot of times we don't have a husband or spouses to where we can meet with them together, and sometimes they want to have those conversations, and sometimes the one spouse is like, nope, absolutely not. You need to talk to this one. Perfect. I want to know that going into that meeting. So that's where we're at with it. We can have those conversations. We can start then in that step 2 process of saying we need to schedule that review. How do they want to be met? Once all that information comes back, now we set either the meeting or in our case, a lot of times we do a video proposal over our renewal because those two people can't meet at the same time. We then actually can talk through their renewal or talk through their policy, and I can ask those questions and send that to them. Video proposals, video renewals are fantastic for us in our agency. We utilize them consistently, and it is a game changer, I think, a lot of times in that case. And then, of course, once we get that information there, then we can actually change our renewal. We can talk to the underwriters about it and make those changes if need be. Hopefully, if we did it far enough in advance prior to the renewal being drafted. Because the one thing that I always hate is, hey, you just got your documents. Please discard those because you're getting new documents out in the mail. And arguing with mortgage lenders about which one to pay. So if you do it well, in advance, hopefully you can catch some of those things. Dion.
Is there a way to right-click on a renewal and email directly from the report?
The actual renewal itself, or to email from this report, absolutely. So in this case, we're looking at these individuals here. Let's talk Derek Shriver. So we can actually send the email specifically to Derek about his renewal here. And again, if it's an email template, just, hey, Derek, your email's coming up, or your renewal's coming up. Actually, here it is, upcoming renewal check-in. You're going to say which we want all. You can actually select all items here inside the template since there's multiple here, or just a selected item. So in this case, if I'm just sending to Derek, I'm just wanting the selected item. Otherwise, I can select all items. And then, of course, we always want to document it. We always want to attach the email to each client, that sort of thing. And if you want to suspend that to an agency staff member, you can do that as well. So if we then click OK, here pops up your email template that was in there. Hey, Derek, in this case, it's going to pre-fill it. Your policy is coming up for renewal soon. We'd like to review it and chat with you. So if you have a calendar link or a link to your calendar or anything like that, or a link to your website for anything, you can always put these in your templates there and stuff like that as well. So yes, you can email directly right out of this website, right out of these reports as well. Yes.
This is really convenient.
Yes. What you can create the settings for the downloads to come in to alert you of premium differences. Do you know, are these reports able to identify in a field or otherwise if the renewal has been, higher than so much or
Uprated.
whatever? Yeah, uprated or whatever.
Let's actually take a look. I don't believe so, right offhand. Dion, do you know that right offhand if the report would include any uprate changes from the download?
From this, I believe because you're working in advance, you're not going to be able to see that. So unless you're
Right.
working where the download's already come through.
But even if download came through, I don't know if the field.
No, on here there wouldn't be.
So there really wouldn't be a way to.
No.
No.
Not without going into the attachment.
Correct.
Correct.
So without going through those. Now again, if you're working in if we start out at the 120-day or 90-day mark, obviously the renewal is not going to be there yet. But once you start running those reports, and especially once you get weekly, and you know when Progressive's going to download, Safeco's going to download, that sort of thing, when you're in that weekly category, if you've done the other steps prior to, now we're saying, okay, we want the download report. The other thing that my renewal team does is they look at our download report daily. From downloads, they look at that, and they're like, okay, they're checking it off their list that, yes, this download one happened in the system. We're not missing it. and 2, this is what it went up or down. Hopefully we catch things obviously before we get to that point, so that way we're not surprised that it went up 28%. Those of you guys that have certain companies, I have one specifically in Ohio right now that everything on a home policy is increasing 55% this year. And so one of the reasons why we go out 120 and 90 days in advance is to catch that and start working on those renewals well in advance before mortgage gets billed and that sort of thing as well. I don't want the customer to receive that email or that deck in the mail and be like, what the heck's going on here? So we try to catch all of that in advance.
Now, does everybody use the download uprate alert feature? Know where it's at and how to use it? Michael, you're on.
I'm on. So in your download rules and download configuration here, again, you have to be an administrator to typically see these settings. But you can go into your personal download rules. Again, it's the gear, and then there's download configuration that you'd click. And then you actually want to scroll down once you're in your personal and your commercial. You can do that both. Let's go. It actually would have that percentage key right there. It's the uprate alert. It applies to renewals and renewal quotes only. You can assign it for a document for review, or you can suspend a log. If you're going to check the suspense log, you want to find out what that magic percent is. If you put 1 in here, it's going to alert you for every renewal that goes up 1%. So in our threshold on our agency is 13%. We chose lucky number 13 because a lot of times 13, I mean, I get alerts for things that are 18%, but and Progressive's famous for it. They take off that magic paid in full discount, and so everything goes up. And so, I can tell exactly what that is most of the time. But our magic number is 13%. You can then assign it to whoever in the agency, whether it's a specific person working on renewals or the agent of record, that sort of thing. And then you can do it as an open transaction. That's what I typically do, so that way we make sure we're always looking at those until we get them done. And then categories. We use categories religiously in our agency because, again, in my suspenses, when I come in here, I don't want 150 suspenses sitting here and me trying to comb through it going, what's going on? I might be on the phone with a company talking quickly about a risk or on hold with a company forever, and I can quickly go through some of my suspenses throughout the day then at this point. So maybe we suspend that as renewal. So when you hit OK, we got to put our premium uprate in there. And so now that that's checked, every renewal that gets downloaded from this point on is now going to set a suspense for anything that's over 13% for your uprate.
This is for what Michael's process is. This is a really good way to catch. Even if you've done all your due diligence, you can't control what the renewal rate's going to be. So this is a really good catch for them. And then you can assign it to somebody in the office. All of those tasks in that download configuration, you can assign to someone in your office so that when it happens, it creates a suspense for them.
So essentially then, some of you guys have on the right-hand side here, you'll have, because you can customize your screen here a little bit, you'll have your suspenses and your suspense categories down here. That's where mine are. And so in this lower right-hand corner, again, when I'm on the phone, I can quickly go through renewals, or whether it's a callback or, there's an urgent category in there for me. So a lot of times they'll suspend something urgently to me, and if I see something pop in there, that kind of takes precedence. Rather than, again, clicking suspenses here and me having to comb through them everything.
Question over here, Michael.
The email that you sent out, that you sent to your insureds about you have an upcoming renewal, about how far in advance do you send that?
We are at least doing those somewhere between the 60 and 90-day mark. I like to try to do it about a 50-day is actually our process inside the agency. That's not always, it's not always worked out that way, but we always try to do it about a 50-day mark. Because a lot of times right now we're still trying to play catch up on our renewals, to be honest, because these individuals that are doing this actually started over the summer. And so we're kind of doing a major overhaul of this in our process right now. What I would like to do is actually get that at that 60-day mark. And so we can start with our mark internally at 90-day. We get to the customer at 60 days. Because most of the time we're getting something from our carriers about specifically on homes around day 45. All right, any other questions?
Hold on, I got one question from infamous Mr. Morton.
Yeah, I saw before where you could compare last year versus this year, and so that can help explain sometimes the up rates.
Absolutely. Let me try to find somebody else here so I can actually, that's unmatched documents. We don't want that. Let's go back to try to find a Smith here. All right, so in this case, and we don't have downloads here, so that's not necessarily going to help us here much, but in your attachments, when you're looking at your downloads, once you open up that renewal that just downloaded, or whether you're looking at previous or whatever the case may be, you can double-click that renewal and it'll open it up in that form there for you to look at. And then there's a button that says Compare Previous there, and it'll then pull it side by side so you can actually compare exactly what is downloaded, what the current coverage A, B, C, D on your home, or current vehicles and that sort of thing. You look at specifically what was last term, what's on the renewal term then, and you can just kind of go right down the deck page there and look at it. So it is a great feature to look at, especially if you're looking at renewals or an uprate and that sort of thing as well.
That most recent policy download that some of us don't ever see, that's also a really helpful tool, CSRs and agents. You want to see the last thing that downloaded, you can get to it with that one click.
Yes, that actually, the question was, is it always there? I will put it this way. That was one of the things that when an update happened, it was one of those things that I missed, and so it took me a while to realize that something else was on that screen that I hadn't realized for quite some time. So I couldn't even tell you when that appeared. I know it was within probably the last year or two with an update. But as they fine-tooth comb things, a lot of times when they take suggestions from agents, we don't like to go through 12 clicks to get to something. We want something pretty instantaneous and quick. And so that's the other thing that they always try to figure out is this landscape here. What can we do? What do we need? What is the most pertinent information we need right at that moment when we're looking at that customer? And so a lot of times they try to change some of those fields a little bit for us. Okay. All right, well, it is, we got about a minute left, so you guys, thank you for being in the presentation today. If you guys do have questions, we'll stick around for a little bit. I know Dr. Williams has his presentation here coming up, and you'll typically find me if you need me. We're going to be there inside the lobby of the ballroom there. Stop by, make sure to stop by and see our vendors too before heading out today, but thank you guys for attending the conference this year.